Section 6 of Chapter 6 is solving quadratic equations by factoring. And I want to stop and start at the beginning right now by saying, if you understand factoring, this is going to be a breeze. If you don't understand factoring still, you've got to go back and ask questions so that you understand factoring, because if you don't understand factoring, then solving by factoring is just one step further that it's just going to be confusing to you. So please, 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 if you don't get it yet, talk to me, all right? I cannot help you if I don't know you're struggling with it, okay? All right, now, if you got factoring, then this is going to be a breeze. Here we go. The whole basis for what we're going to do today is just this. It's quite simple. If A times B is 0, then either A equals 0 or B equals 0, all right? So if I say I multiplied two numbers together and I got 0, you may or may not know what one of them is, but you know that the other one has to be 0, because in order to get an answer of 0, you've got to multiply by 0. Okay? Let me show you what I mean with factors, with binomials that are factors. So if you have factored your equation and you end up with x plus 2 times x minus 3, and that equals 0, then you know that either this equals 0 or this equals 0, because when you multiply them together, you get 0. So in order to solve that, all you're going to do is you're going to set each factor equal to 0. Either this equals 0 or this equals 0, one or the other. It doesn't have to be both, but these are the possible solutions. So we're going to, in order to solve for x now, we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. So x is either -2 or add 3 to both sides on this one, or x equals 3. And I just realized I have a glare that I can fix easily. Ta-da! There we go. All right. So for this one, this has two solutions. Either x is -2 or x is 3. And if it's either of those answers, then that will make this statement true. All right? So let's start one step back and let's actually solve. I'm not usually going to give you the binomials. I'm going to give you the equation and say, solve this. What is x equal to? That's what algebra is all about, is trying to find out, well, what on earth does that variable equal? What is a number value for that variable? So what you're going to do here is, if you want to solve this, you've got to figure out, well, what did I multiply together to get 0? Because if I knew what I multiplied together to get 0, I would know one of those would have to be 0. So you're going to use your factoring skills, and your first term has to multiply together to get 2x squared. So you know you're going to have an x and an x, and you know that 2 is just 1 times 2, and there are no other factors. So you know you're going to have an x and a 2x. X times 2x is 2x squared. So we have our first terms taken care of, and we know they're correct. To get the last terms, remember, you've got to multiply your last term, and 5 is just 1 times 5. Those are the only options to multiply together to get 5. So now we have to combine them in order to get the middle term. I think some of you are forgetting that that middle term has to match up. You're also forgetting that you can check this every time, and you can get the right answer every time simply by going through and checking it using FOIL. All right, so 1 and 5, I'm just going to arbitrarily put the 1 here and the 5 here, and I know my signs are different, and I know my biggest one, I want my biggest one to be positive. So we're just going to put the positive here and the negative here and see what happens. Because I know -1 times 5 is -5, and I know the first term's 2x times x is 2x squared. Now I need my outsides plus my insides to be 9x. So let's check them and see. 5 times x is 5x, and -1 times 2x is -2x. 5x minus 2x is 3x. So that's not right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase these, and I'm going to just switch them. 5 here and 1 here, because I know those have to be those numbers, because that's the only thing I can multiply together to get 5. So now I'm going to multiply, excuse me, 1 times x is x, and minus 5 times 2 is 10x. That equals -9x, and I need a positive 9x. So now I know, ooh, I'm almost there. All I have to do is switch my signs, and now I've got negative x and positive 10x, and that equals positive 9x. So I've got my factors correct. You can always check them. Your factors, there's no reason your factors should ever be wrong because you can check it every time, all right? So I know this times this is the same as all of that. So x plus 5 times 2x minus 1 equals 0. Now the easy part, okay? These two multiplied together equals 0. So either one of these is 0 or the other is equal to 0. So just set them equal to 0. X plus 5 equals 0 or 2x minus 1 equals 0. And now there are simple equations to solve that you did back in Algebra 1. All right? This one has an extra 5, so you're going to subtract 5 from both sides. So x equals negative 5. Or add 1 to both sides. So 2x equals 1. Divide by 2 on both sides. So x equals 1/2. So these are my two answers, negative 5 and 1/2. All right? Let's do this one. This one has, remember that before you start factoring into the binomials, you also need to look to see, this one has x to the third, x squared. This one has an x also. So I can factor an x out of all of these. There isn't a constant in front of this one, so I can't factor out any of the constants. So we're going to have x, and then if we pull it out of everything, I'm going to look to see what's left. X squared is left here. Minus 3, and there's just one x here because I pulled one out. Minus 10, and there's no x here because I pulled it out. So that equals 0. Now, don't lose your x. And I just realized that my camera might be, you work on x squared minus 3x minus 10. Can you find the factors of those? And don't get dizzy. I'm going to move this down so that I've got some more space to work with. There we go. Now I can work further down and you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so now, did you do this part already? So now ignore the x, but don't lose it. And now what do you multiply together to get the x squared? That's just x times x. That's easy. The sign is negative on this last term, so I know my signs are different on the second terms. 10 is either 1 times 10 or 2 times 5, and that's it. So now I want, because these signs are different, I'm going to be subtracting them to get 3. So 10 minus 1 is 9. It's not that one. 5 minus 2 is 3. So I'm going to use the 5 and the 2. And because I want the bigger one to be negative, I'm going to make the 5 negative and the 2 positive. Now I'm always going to check it to make sure. So x times x is x squared, yes. And my last terms, 2 times negative 5 is negative 10, yes. The outsides and the insides are trickier. Don't forget to check them. Negative 5x plus 2x. Negative 5 plus 2 is negative 3x. So my middle terms are correct. So I'm good to go. Now I have my factors. And if you'll notice, I now have 3 factors. So this times this times this equals 0. So x times x plus 2 times x minus 5 equals 0. So nothing changes except we have one more factor. We still, one of these has to be 0 in order for this to be a true statement. So let's just set all 3 equal to 0. So either x equals 0, or x plus 2 equals 0, or x minus 5 equals 0. All right? Because when we multiply them together, they equal 0. One or the other of these has to be 0. So this one is already solved. X equals 0, or x plus 2 equals 0, so subtract 2 from both sides, so x equals negative 2. There's one answer. Or x minus 5, add 5 to both sides, so x equals 5. So my final answer is 0, negative 2, and 5. All of those are possible solutions for x cubed minus 3x squared minus 10x equals 0. All right, now I'm going to give you a step-by-step process. So while I move that camera back up and make you dizzy again, here's your steps. So write these down, please. Step 1, you're going to set the equation equal to 0. If the equation is not already equal to 0, make sure that it is, because if it's not equal to 0, then this doesn't work. Because you can multiply other things and get other numbers, but we don't know where to start. So the equation has to be equal to 0. And in these cases, all 3 of these that we did already are equal to 0. We're going to do one more where it's not. So make sure that your equation is set equal to 0. And then step 2 is to factor, and that's putting them into the getting everything out. First, factoring out a greatest common factor, and then using the two binomials. So then factor it. Step 3, set each of those factors equal to 0. And then step 4 is just to solve for each of those variables. All right? While you finish writing that down, I'll give you one more problem. Okay. Do you have it written down? If you don't, pause it and get it all. I want that in your notes. I want you to have the steps. So step 1, this is the first time we've done it this way. Step 1 is to set your equation equal to 0. If you'll look here, 6y squared minus 5y equals 4 minus 28y. It's not equal to 0. But you can do that easily. What I would do is always keep your y squared term positive. So we're going to use this side of the equation and move everything else this way. So we're going to subtract 4 from both sides. And we're going to add 28y to both sides. Okay, when we do that, 6y squared, the 28y and the negative 5y are like terms. So we can combine those and get plus 23y. Do you see what I did? I did 2 steps in one. I hope that doesn't confuse you. Because this 28y matches up with the negative 5y. So 28 minus 5 is 23y. And the minus 4 doesn't have a like term on this side of the equation, so it just kind of sits out there by itself. And if you'll notice, I kept this in descending order of the powers, of the terms. So y squared and then y and then no variable here. Because now we can look to see, do we have any common denominator or common factors? 6, 23, and 4. 6 and 4 have 2, but 23 is not. So I think that we're just going to have to factor. Let's see what we got here. So 6y squared, that's either 1 and 6 or 2 times 3. This is going to be a little bit more tricky because 4 also has 1 times 4 and 2 times 2. So we know that our middle term is going to be rather large. So we're going to probably use our bigger numbers. So let's use 2 and 3 and 1 and 4 just to start out with. And we're just guessing, and that's okay. So 2y times 3y. 2 times 3 is 6, and y times y is y squared. So far, so good. And let's take 1 and 4. So we're going to take 1 times 4. And this is negative. So 1 is going to be positive and 1 is negative. So we've already checked our first terms and our last terms. Let's check the middle. 2 times 4 is negative 8y, and 3 times 1 is plus 3y. You know what? Because we're subtracting, 8 minus 3 is going to be 5. That's way too small. So even if I were to switch these and put a 3 times 4, that's only 12, and that's still not big enough. So I'm going to say, wow, I think I need something even bigger. I think I need to change these to 6 and 1. Let's try that, because 6 times 4 is going to be much larger. So let's try this. So now check our first terms. 6y times y is 6y squared. Our last term is positive 1 times negative 4 is negative 4. Now don't forget to check the insides. 6y times negative 4 is negative 24y. 6 times 4 is 24. Plus y. Negative 24 plus y is going to be a negative 23y, which is really close, except I need it to be positive. So in that case, I'm going to just change my signs here. And now I have 6 times 4 is a positive 24 minus y. There's my positive 23y, which is this one. So this step takes a little bit of time. You're going to have to take the time to do it and find the right combination, or you're not going to end up with the right answer. So now 6y minus 1 times y plus 4 equals 0. So we did the first part. We set it equal to 0. We factored. Now step 3, set each factor equal to 0. So 6y minus 1 equals 0, or y plus 4 equals 0. And now it's a simple matter of solving each factor for solving each of these small equations. So add 1 to both sides. 6y equals 1. Divide by 6. Y equals 1/6. There's one solution. Subtract 4. Y equals negative 4. All right? So really and truly, the only thing we're adding is set each factor equal to 0 and solve. And these equations should be really, really, really simple equations by the time you get down to their factors. So the hardest part of this still is the factoring. So if you're not understanding factoring, please ask me. This is going to, it's going to follow you on and on and on the next few sections. So make sure you ask. Make sure you have these 4 steps and you're good to go. I'll see you later.